In the past weeks, we have traced the history of air power in peace and war. From what we have seen, we may be able to understand its importance today and its possibilities tomorrow. Perhaps the first thing to remember is that the whole development of air power has taken place in one generation, our generation. When I joined the Royal Flying Corps in 1912, the use of aeroplanes in warfare was an adventure into the unknown. Our first bombers were primitive tactical weapons, designed to support the army in the field. Their range was small, and their bombs wouldn't have done much damage even if it had been possible to drop them accurately, which it wasn't. Sometimes the bomb was more lethal to the pilot than to the enemy. As for the tactics, well, we were still thinking in terms of giving close support to the charge of the Light Brigade. The idea that the air itself was the battlefield of the future was only dawning. But during the Kaiser War, the fighter was born, and with it, the battle for air superiority. Aircraft like these fought the enemy to gain the control of the air on which the work of our reconnaissance machines depended. 2 years later, the first bomber squadrons of the independent Air Force started attacking German industrial targets across the Rhine. The strategic use of air power had started along the road where we stand today. At sea, during those years, the Royal Naval Air Service had to face its own difficulties. But by 1918, it had grown into a large and efficient force which was establishing the principles of air-sea war, to search, to find and fix enemy war vessels, and then help the Navy to destroy them. By 1918, our early aircraft carriers were showing the value of naval air power, which was to lead to the great carrier actions of the Second World War. Between the two world wars, experiments and improvements in aircraft design went on steadily, but the original ideas hardly changed. These are still biplanes, based on the old formula. Even by the early 1930s, when the threat from the Luftwaffe was already clear, these biplanes constituted our front-line air defense. They made a fine show at the Hendon air displays, but it was the past that they wrote in the sky. The Germans, meanwhile, were building fast airliners which could be used as troop carriers or bombers. They failed to build a long-range strategic bomber force, but they produced a variety of two-engine bombers with what we now think of as a medium range, enough to attack Britain from the continent. Against these, the fighter was assisted by the world's first early warning radar and a control system which helped to win the Battle of Britain. Our own faith in strategic bombing remained firm. We had long since produced our first long-range monoplanes, the Welsleys, the precursors of the Wellingtons and the giants of Bomber Command. It was the Allies who did what the Germans and Japanese failed to do. We built up a great force of long-range heavy bombers with which we could cripple the enemy in his homeland. Then, in 1945, the strategic bombers were given a new bomb, and the whole force of air power was multiplied 1 million times in a single blinding flash.
In this cloud, the atomic age was born, and soon on the deserted coastline of Australia, Britain was testing her own nuclear weapons. This was Montebello in October 1952, before the 0 hour of Operation Hurricane. This was to be ground zero. This was to be vaporized. Here, years of calculation and months of work narrowed down to one more moment of destruction. In Australia, America, Russia, the trials continued. The earth shook and the sky was darkened. In these deserts, which we have made more desolate, even the air is lethal, and men must go hooded, holding their Geiger counters like charms against invisible death. As the weapons of attack grow more monstrous, the tasks of civil defense are multiplied. Lessons learned over the past decade still hold, but training has been recast for a war in which the power and horror of the bombs shown in this film will be increased 100-fold.
We have seen what the effects of an airburst atomic bomb, heat, radiation, and blast might do to a typical British city. Let us now apply these effects to the population of that city and see what might happen to them. In the first place, if there had been no warning prior to the attack, and then with the assumption that a clear 5-minute warning had been sounded. We will assume that the attack is in daylight and the weather is fine, except for the usual industrial haze that hangs over a city. You remember that in measuring the effect of an atom bomb, the point directly below the burst is known as ground zero. We will now take a factory situated at a point 1/4 of a mile away from ground zero. It's nearly time for the shift to change over, and the workers are hanging about outside. Nearby is the administrative block of modern steel girder construction. At ground floor level is one of the secretaries standing near a window. Suddenly, and without any warning, an atomic bomb bursts 1,000 feet in the air and about 1/4 of a mile away. These people are all killed. In theory, they have died 3 times over. Firstly, from heat flash. It would have killed them instantly, and their bodies will be charred. Secondly, they will have received a lethal dose of gamma rays, and their bodies may be contaminated by fission products. And thirdly, they will be crushed under the debris. And now the secretary. As she is in an office on the far side of the block from the explosion, she is shielded from the heat flash. There are several floors above her, and the thickness of another building at the back, say 3 or 4 feet of concrete in all. That should be sufficient to protect her from a lethal dose of gamma rays. So she is protected from the first 2 effects that killed the workers out in the open. But she will be killed by the effects of blast. At 1/4 of a mile from ground zero, a modern steel-framed block will be largely destroyed.
But these bombs have only a fraction of the power of the hydrogen bomb.
The new bomb and the jet engine, a combination which now shadows the history of civilization. The new engine came pat on its cue with pistons and air screws nearly at their limits. Overnight, the equation of defense was unbalanced. The measure of the power of the air is that it has grown in 35 years from the tactical support of the charge of the Light Brigade to the potential destroyer of the world. Theoretical attack is now from aircraft powered by a thrust hitherto undreamt of. The immediate need was defensive for new fighters to outpace sound.
Here's a Hawker Hunter taking off now. This single-seat fighter is the latest of a long line of fighters designed by Sir Sidney Camp. It's now in production for the Royal Air Force. Here's the Fallen Midge, designed by W.E.W. Petter as a prototype for the supersonic Nag, a small aircraft but a big idea. This Delta aircraft is the Gloster Javelin, a twin-jet fighter carrying full radar for night and all-weather work. In spite of its unusual shape, it handles like a conventional airplane. And here's another twin-engine jet fighter, the de Havilland 110, now on order for the Royal Navy. These are all aircraft developed for the high performance needed to intercept the jet bomber.
But the new aircraft still demand a human brain behind the controls. No magic box can yet replace the pilot, and the human body has to be trained to new endurance. The battleground is now 50,000 feet above the Earth. The speed of it is measured not in miles an hour, but in Mach numbers. This is the stuff of science fiction, grown in 10 years from a warfare which now seems an age of time ago. Our new fighters are really but a first step in a fresh conquest of the air. To their designers was given the task of providing maneuverable, controllable, weapon-carrying platforms, fit to fight at heights and at speeds of which we still know little. A few minutes to climb, a few seconds to close a bomber at a combined speed of some 1,300 miles an hour, and a split second to attack. Only radar of great range and accuracy can give our fighters a chance. The days of mass raids are over, but 100 jet bombers can do what was once the work of thousands. Any one of any 100 may carry a hydrogen bomb. They must all be plotted. They must all be shot down. A split second to attack. And it's an attack which must have 80 to 90% more certainty in its kill than has ever been achieved in the air before. The Royal Navy, too, must have new jets and new techniques to use them, the steam catapult to get them airborne. For over the sea, the problem is just the same. And much of the air we depend on lies over the sea. Angled decks and mirror landing sites get the jets down again. Angled decks which allow a pilot a clear overrun should he want to rejudge his approach. The Fleet Air Arm planes must be as fast as their shore-based counterparts. They must be fit to meet the same enemy. Aerodromes which can go to the furthest seas. Aircraft which, while keeping performance, can somehow get range and endurance and win us a handful of seconds of time. These are the things, the costly and intricate things, for which we must strive. Refueling in flight is one of the many devices tried to cheat the fuel hungriness of the new jet power. And all the time, there must be research. This, the vertical takeoff flying bedstead, reminds us that in many ways, we are still in the Wright brothers stage of this, the new aviation.
But fighter defense is only part of the answer. Throughout the Western world, new bases have been built for long-range bombers. Strategic bombing, or the threat of it, is still the heart of air power. Runways are longer, bombers fly faster and further, bombs are more terrible. Yet the intent behind them is not to win another war, but to prevent it. American long-range bombers stand by in Britain to back the NATO forces with an international riot squad. For Allied commanders agree that our first line of defense must be a bomber force to be held ready as a deterrent to any would-be aggressor. For this strategic force, Britain is building new bombers, bred in the tradition of the Vimy and the Lancaster, the V bombers. They can carry their deadly load half across the world at near the speed of sound. The Valiant, and the Victor, and the Vulcan. In these rest our present hopes of enforcing peace, that the world may yet survive under a Pax Atomica.
Behind the problem of the present, which is still a fighter versus bomber war, there is the shadow of the missile. The push-button war, not yet reached but advancing. The shadow of war by machine against machine. All the world's great aircraft establishments are using their best research brains on this business of making robots to stand the stresses the human body can never stand. At secret places on our coasts, the early missiles took us on the first steps which led to the great new weapon range at Woomera. Here, in what was once a desert, men now live remote amidst equipment which serves the new science and the new ways of war. These are pictures of early British experiments, the beginnings of the new defense and of the new attack, the missile in all its forms. This is the logical end of air power, the cold inhumanity of robot against robot, of Frankenstein in 40 years.
In America, as in Australia and Britain, the guided missile has grown from prophecy to fact. These things exist. These things exist and work. They find and hit their quarry. They can be launched from the ground or from ships at sea. This is the interceptor of the future, controlled by radio towards the pilotless plane, which is its target. Other missiles can be fired from planes in flight. Find their own way to the target, weave in, and close for the kill. We are learning a new language of war. 3, 2, 1, fire. Litany is intoned time after time, month after month, year after year. The doomed, unpiloted target is tracked and followed. Our hopes of holding our own in the air increase as techniques improve and the kills mount up. This is the work of a small defensive missile. But behind the burning wreckage of one machine lies a greater threat, of the long-range rocket with atomic warhead. Here is a shadow that hangs above our world. Our fears, suspicions, nightmares of the future are all held in this picture of our shrunken Earth. From here we can see the main centers of human life. America, Europe, Asia, gathered in close, in range of one another. We push the boundaries of our world and of our knowledge further and further into the unknown. And to these limits, we carry our quarrels and our armament. Even on the polar cap, the air bases are built, the runways laid, the machinery of flight installed. By airliner or by warplane, New York and Moscow, London and Peking are only a few hours' flight apart by this frozen route. But whether this is to be a new link between us or our last battlefield depends not on the machines we fly, but on ourselves. This then is the air plan under which we live. This is the roof of our world. We are all neighbors in a cold ring, and our future lies not in the hands of science, but in the hearts of men. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, And though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, and have not charity, I am nothing. And now abideth faith, hope, charity, these three. But the greatest of these is charity.